We deploy app connectors in data centers, infrastructure as a service, always deploy them as a pair, so they have resilience, and treat every data center or infrastructure as a service, VPC or region as a different connector group. If I have a data center in London, a data center in New York, I use AWS US West and Azure EMEA Central. That's 4 different locations, 4 different connector groups, and 8 connectors that would need to be deployed. Ensure that the app connectors can route to the internet and those internal applications. There's a connectivity requirement for those applications, both from a routing as well as a layer 4 connectivity. There's minimum hardware requirements or VM requirements in terms of CPU and memory, which are continually kept updated on the Zscaler help pages. App connectors should be able to connect to those applications that they're going to provide access to. So TCP, we need obviously to have those ports open. For UDP, because we can't do a health check, you need ICMP open. So the client will make an ICMP or a ping to the application and infer the health based on that. Health is also inferred for UDP applications based on a previous TCP health check. For example, I make a TCP connection to TCP 389 and then I get a UDP connection to the same server on UDP 389. I will infer that the application is healthy because I had a TCP connection. It's also important to understand that the source IP of any application access traffic will then become the IP address of the app connector. So a user accessing an application through the Zero Trust Exchange will have a client connector tunnel to the Zero Trust Exchange, and from the Zero Trust Exchange through the app connector, the source IP that the user is presented onto the network will be the IP address of the app connector. There are changes that are necessary for things like Active Directory. Active Directory applies policy based on the client IP address. So it's important that the IP address of the app connector is used in Active Directory for things like sites and services, which define how the user accesses the domain controllers or which domain controller the user will be redirected to, authenticated against, or get their GPO from. So in my example I used previously, we have AWS, we have Azure, we have our 2 data centers. We create a connector group in each of them. Each of those connector groups routes out through the firewall to the Zero Trust Exchange. Each of those connector groups has a DNS configuration, their local DNS server. Each of those app connectors has the ability to make health checks to the application and make connections to those applications. You may have connectivity between the data centers AWS through an express route or a direct connect to connect through to your infrastructure as a service.